I recently read a book with the title Piranesi. It is a story about a man living inside an infinitely large classical house filled with marble statues. He lives as a vagabond, traversing the endless halls and corridors, living off fish from the ocean that spills into the house. As the story progresses, we start realizing that his lifestyle doesn't quite match our expectations of how one usually inhabits a giant classical house. Intuitively, we would think it was inhabited by philosophers in togas or Borgesian librarians. Instead, he's more like a homeless person sleeping in a nylon sleeping bag amongst the sublime architecture. The name of the book references the artist Giovanni Battista Piranesi, famous for his illustrations of subterranean prisons. If you've read the book, it becomes apparent why these are referenced. However, there's another drawing by Piranesi which I find much more interesting in relation to the book, namely his enormous plan of Rome called Campo Marzio. Piranesi arrived in Rome in 1740. Over the next few decades, he produced hundreds of etchings, capturing ruins that had survived since Roman times, but also designs that he came up with based on how he imagined ancient Rome. His works blur the line between archaeology and imagination, creating visions that feel simultaneously ancient and futuristic. Not unlike his contemporary Etienne Louis Boullée, who drew sublime monuments that challenged the laws of nature, reminiscent of the biblical story of the Tower of Babel that reached towards the heaven. One of these monuments Piranesi depicted in exquisite detail is the Pantheon. Built nearly 2,000 years ago, it remains the largest unenforced concrete dome on Earth, made with Roman concrete, which is stronger than any concrete we are able to produce today. The original purpose of the pagan temple is unknown. The structure burnt down and was rebuilt 3 times, and it's reasonable to think that its function changed several times. Its last usage was as a Catholic church, despite its plan being circular and not shaped as a cross, as churches usually are. In his imagined plan of Rome, Piranesi placed the Pantheon at the heart of a much larger complex, a sprawling network of temples, public gardens, pools, and thermal baths. Visiting Rome today, the Pantheon is super impressive, but it's nothing compared to the mega site that Piranesi envisioned. It requires some imagination to really imagine what these plans would be like to inhabit. I've 3D modeled some sections to help us do that. And as the video goes on, I encourage you to really see the drawing, not just as beautiful patterns, but as spaces to explore. So, as we further explore the plan, Piranesi's Rome becomes even more epic. The entire city transforms into an unbroken expanse of monumental architecture. Structures like the Colosseum, already vast in our reality, are dwarfed by Piranesi's fantasies. One such creation is an enormous calendar tracking the sun's orbits through the year. Another is a huge area framed by a dug-out waterway. It features 2 racing tracks and a giant theatre, and a long hallway tapering towards a point. Just take a moment to consider what is being shown here. This is a really weird plan. At the foot of the monument is Hadrian's tomb, which still stands today as the fortress in the center of Rome. His drawing envisioned plans of epic proportions, never seen before in the West. For comparison, this is the size of St. Peter's Church. Looks tiny, right? Today, the giant scale has become pretty common, with megastructures like the Tesla Gigafactory and an Amazon warehouse. Because of its beauty, variety, and sheer strangeness, Piranesi's plan has become a cornerstone of architectural theory, especially loved by postmodern architects. One of the most compelling interpretations comes from the architect Pier Vittorio Aureli and his project A Field of Walls. Aureli notes that Piranesi's plan is defined by walls rather than the street. This is clear from comparing Piranesi's plan to the Nolli map drawn by his contemporary. This map distinguishes public and private spaces as black and white. The result is a much more closed-off plan where buildings are drawn as solids, putting the streets into focus. Aureli argues that the street is subversive. It seemingly enables movement, but at the same time controls it. A wall, on the other hand, is honest. Aureli likes how Piranesi doesn't distinguish between the public and private like Nolli did. He calls the plan a field of walls that are ambiguous, open for interpretation by the inhabitants. Inspired by this, Aureli superimposes 15 massive stone walls onto Piranesi's plan. The walls create strange intersections with a monumental building, creating non-topological spaces. No room is the same, and so the life of every inhabitant is different. This is very different to the modern grid of identical apartments that we are so used to today. Aureli saw Piranesi's plan as a space to be inhabited. And in a way, Susanna Clarke's novel starts envisioning what that might look like. She imagines a single person living in a giant monument that is more like a landscape than a house. The cornices are dotted with birds' nests, and a tidal ocean enters the house regularly. Her book makes me wonder what a society living inside Piranesi's plan would be like. Would they all sleep communally under a giant dome? Or hang curtains to subdivide a giant hall of columns? Would they use the Colosseum for boxing matches? Or paint giant murals on the stone walls? Would they hold ceremonial processions along the colonnades? Or throw rave parties in the public gardens? To conclude, I want to re-emphasize the main argument of the video. I think Susanna Clarke's book, Piranesi's drawing, and Pier Vittorio Aureli's interpretation of it all believe that the past holds many valuable lessons. That past worlds might have gotten things right that we have lost. This is in stark contrast to the modern movement that thought only by ridding ourselves of outdated tradition that we can make a better world. Piranesi's historical plans are less an archaeological survey and more a utopian vision for the future that we can imitate if we wish. We might want to emulate the sublime beauty of Piranesi's drawings, seeing the buildings less as machines for living and more as works of art. Sure, this might cost much more, but ultimately, it's a question of what we prioritize as a culture. Or we might consider Aureli's more conceptual argument, which is building less homogeneous spaces. Inspired by the amazing variety of Piranesi's plan, we can create non-typical houses that inspire different ways of living. If nothing else, I hope you have enjoyed spending some time inside this amazing plan. I've certainly enjoyed exploring every nook and cranny as I've made this video. And with that, thank you for watching.